Hello, good evening, and welcome to Prog Chattery 777. We are continuing our conversation on Primus, and we've made it to the year 1999 with AntiPop. This is their 6th studio album, and it's the second album to feature Brian Mantia on the drums, the first one, of course, being the Brown album. So we get the core lineup of Les Claypool on vocals and bass, Larry Lalonde on wonderful jangly guitar, and Brain on the drums. And it's ultimately probably one of the more controversial albums in the catalog. It's probably my least favorite album personally, and the reason for that is that they chose to bring in a whole slew of outside producers and guest musicians. I think the reason for that is it's the natural cycle of how bands go. I think they were just very overworked. They were touring very, very hard. They had at this point they had quite a slew of very successful records behind them, and they're obviously very influential, and there was no small amount of pressure there on them to live up to that reputation. So I think they were a little bit unsure of themselves, and that's why they were seeking a little outside assistance. So they got a whole bunch of wacky characters on here. We got Tom Morello. He produces a lot of the tracks. I think three or four. I think it's 3. He does 3 of the tracks. Matt Stone of South Park fame. Of course, Primus, around the time of the Brown album, they recorded the South Park theme song quite famously, which is quite funny, and it's a great little theme song. It's funny that Matt Stone's one of the producers on here, actually, but the track that he produces is one of my favorites on the album, actually. We also get Fred Durst of Linkin Park fame. He's on one of the tracks. Stuart Copeland from The Police. That's very cool. One of my favorite drummers. And we get another collaboration with Tom Waits. Of course, he was on Tommy the Cat back in the early days, back in the Sailing the Seas of Cheese days, and he produces a track on here as well, which is quite cool, and plays a bit of Mellotron as well. Can't get enough of Mellotron. Love the Mellotron. So yeah, it is quite a slew of wacky characters that come in, and that's cool. But I think the reason that I'm less a fan of this album than others is that all these outside influences make it sound less like Primus. The magic of Primus is that 3-piece unit, that creates that fantastic sound, that eclectic folk, or that eclectic funky, folky, psychedelic kind of a thing. And that's not really present on here. So that's where the main point of controversy comes in. On the plus side, the production ultimately is quite good, actually. Because the production is better, I think this is actually probably Brain's shining moment for a Primus album. We really get to hear Brain's drumming a lot better than we did on the Brown album. Like I said, the Brown album has got this almost grating drum sound to it. The songs are really good on it. I like a lot of the songs, but the drums just get exhausting to the ears because it has that big, that real fuzzy kind of old school kind of a sound to it. But the drums sound great on here, and the production in general does sound really, really good. And it's interesting too that when you talk about Primus, everyone you always hear the phrase funk metal thrown around. And, for the most part in the catalog, I don't really see that. I know I mentioned it, talking about the early albums, Frizzle Fry, those early days, it was, I guess you could call it funk metal. And, of course, both Les Claypool and Larry Lalonde were a part of Blind Illusion way back in the mid-'80s, and that was a metal band, and Claypool famously auditioned for Metallica, so they've kind of got that association with metal. At this point, they'd been touring with a lot of metal bands as well. I mean, there was Slayer and Black Sabbath, a whole bunch of bands for Ozfest. They were touring with that kind of stuff, but on the whole, I don't really see Primus as a metal thing. There's a funk element to it, there's a heavy element to it, but they're folky and psychedelic as well, and proggy, of course. That's why they're on this channel. But of course, not just a prog channel, even though I've called it Prog Chattery. But I'm drifting as I do. Yeah, and talking about funk metal, back to funk metal, I think this is probably the closest representation of that. It is very, very heavy, this album. It took me a long time to get to that point. But yeah, as I'm rambling, we'll talk about the songs. We'll make our way through this strange but ultimately not terrible album. It opens, funnily enough, with the sound of Tom Waits at the Mellotron. That's the first thing that we hear, and we actually hear Tom do the 1, 2, 3 that he counts us into the first track, which is Electric Uncle Sam. This is the first collaboration with Tom Morello, and it's one of the better ones, actually, I think, of those collaborations. Good funky jam. I like the yeah. That's quite a classic Claypool thing. But there's a commerciality to it. I think that might be one of the things. This could be the sellout album, really. I don't know if it's a sellout album, but you can tell right off the bat they were thinking a little bit more commercially. You know, Electric Uncle Sam is got that very immediate hook, and it's, you know, they're trying to welcome the listener rather than intrigue the listener. I think that's perhaps an important point. But it's a good song, and it's got funky little jammy kind of a piece in the middle. Doom doom boom doom 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 doom. But it's very Rage Against the Machine, and that's obviously the Tom Morello influence. And there's another track on here that's even more guilty of that. But I like Electric Uncle Sam. The next track, track 3 on the album, is really the second song though, is Natural Joe. This is the one that they did with Matt Stone. And this is one of my favorites on the album. Really, really great groove. That's kind of a classic Primus thing. That sounds more like Primus than a lot of the other songs, actually. And there's some funny sound effects in there. There's a lot of sound effects throughout the whole album, actually. And then a little triplet. That's quite good. I like the lyrics as well. There's some funny, jokey lyrics in there, but yeah, on the whole, quite a good track. We get to track 4, which is Laquer Head. This is actually one of the first Primus songs I ever heard, and I quite liked it. This is the one that has Fred Durst, the Linkin Park guy, is on here. And again, this is probably closer to a classic Primus sound with that. It's got that very distinctive bass playing. Obviously, all the tracks have the Les Claypool distinction on them, but there's something very Primus-y about the Laquer Head. And it's got a very, very, you know, big, heavy section in the middle. Well, the middle section's not heavy. The choruses are quite heavy. The middle section's kind of got that psychedelic thing. Almost, he's doing that that kind of reminds me of To Defy the Laws of Tradition, actually. So there's a certain thread of continuity there. Pretty good song. Takes us to track 5, which is the title track, the AntiPop. And this one's got no outside producers. This is just Primus firing on all cylinders, and it's another one of the better tracks on the album, actually. It's got some fun sound effects. At the very end, I like this concludes the recording of the crypt. It's kind of a weird little thing. A little more elaborate than some of the other songs. You know, there is a bit more of a structure to it. You know, the big intro and then the track itself. Got a great energy to it. And again, it's got a hook to it as well, which is kind of funny. You know, it's almost what's the word? Not juxtapositional. There's a weird contrast between the lyrics and the music, because the music is quite commercial, I think. But he's singing about being the anti-pop and going against the grain till the day he drops, and all that. But it is more commercial, which is quite strange. But also, yeah, I like the song. It's good. We move on to Eclectic Electric. This is probably one of the epics on the album. Very, very long. There's a lot of multi-sections to it. I love the great atmosphere at the beginning. Again, this is one of the self-produced tracks as well, which is cool. But we get James Hetfield on here. James Hetfield makes an appearance, and when Hetfield's section comes up, the middle section, it just sounds too much like Metallica. And again, that's kind of the problem with the album, is that, you know, the outside collaborators just kind of try to make Primus sound like what they like. And that's one, you know, kind of problem I guess I have with the album. But I mean, the song itself is really cool. I mean, I like the song. I like the sound of it. I like Hetfield's contribution. But is it Primus? That's the question. Should this be on a Primus album, or should this be a different, you know, Claypool solo thing, or, you know, more well-known to be a collaborative thing? I don't know. But it's a good song. We get to track 7, Greet the Sacred Cow. And this is, I like this song. I like this song too. I like a lot of these songs. I keep saying that. I keep just going on and saying I like everything. Trust me, it is my least favorite. I really like the intro to Greet the Sacred Cow. I like that Middle Eastern flavor that it has, and it kind of retains that as well as it goes through. Again, quite heavy. Probably a little bit dated. I mean, it has a very 90s feel, and again, the commerciality that it's meant to be. It's meant to attract the listener rather than intrigue the listener, like I said earlier. But it's a good track, one of the better ones on the album. We get to track 8 though, and this is my least favorite on the album. Mama Didn't Raise No Fool. It's another one of the Tom Morello tracks, and to me it just sounds way too much like Rage Against the Machine. He's just trying to turn Primus into Rage Against the Machine. That whole it's a riff taken right out of that whole songbook, and it's fine. Rage Against the Machine's fine, but it's not Primus. It's very not Primacy. So I'm not a huge fan of that track, to be honest. Track 9, we got Dirty Drowning Man. This is the one where Stuart Copeland makes an appearance. And it's an okay track. It's not, I enjoy it when I listen to it, but it's not memorable. It doesn't stick with you, like certain other tracks. It doesn't stand out in the catalog, or even on the album for that matter. We've got a track 10, Ballad of Bodacious, Tale About a Bull, and this is another self-produced track, so you just get the classic Primus lineup. And it's funny, it's like a guilty pleasure. I don't really like the song, but, unlike Dirty Drowning Man, it's very memorable. It really sticks in my head. It's got a classic, very classic Larry the Long guitar line, which is quite fantastic. I'm doing those little vocal things again, my goodness. But the song itself, I'm not a huge fan of, because it's basically, Claypool doing old school rap. But it's catchy, and I can't blame that. Again, commerciality appears to be that seems to be the word that I keep saying as I go through the tracks. Move on to track 11, we get Power Mad. This is the last collaboration with Tom Morello, and this is probably my favorite of the Tom Morello tracks on here. It's a little bit more, a little bit less Rage Against the Machine-y, a little bit more Primacy, I guess. But again, not terribly memorable. It doesn't stick with me, but I enjoy it as I listen to it. Kind of similar to Electric Uncle Sam, actually, but Electric Uncle Sam it may have the edge because it's the first on the album. You hear that one the first, but yeah, it's a good track. We go to track 12, Final Voyage of the Liquid Sky. This is kind of they're returning to that psychedelic sound, like the whole Tales from the Punch Bowl kind of era. And so I like it. I think that might be my favorite track on the album. That might be the best track on the album. It is extended. It is more like an epic, and it's got a kind of Floydian feel to it as well. It does get heavy and big, but it's kind of got a slower tempo than some of the other tracks. But very atmospheric and very psychedelic and all that. So it's a good track. And finally, we get to the last track on the album. Coattails of a Dead Man. This is the Tom Waits collaboration, and it's funny, the very intro of the album, that sound of Tom Waits' Mellotron, and 1, 2, 3 is repeated, and he's actually counting in the waltz time of Coattails of a Dead Man. And this is probably a contender for one of the best songs on the album as well. The question, is it Primacy? It has a very Tom Waitsy kind of feel. It's not like Tommy the Cat, where Tom Waits is brought in and he kind of does his fun little narration. This is kind of sounds like a Tom Waits song with Les doing his thing over top. But it is a really good song as a piece. And it's closest to a folk kind of a thing. Like I said, most of this album is very heavy, and they're trying to live up to that funk metal thing. Folk metal, that'd be a thing. Funk metal, they're living up to that funk metal thing. So Coattails of a Dead Man is more of that folky kind of a thing. And it's got there's a female vocalist. God, what is her name? It's in here. She's got a long name. She sings on Coattails of a Dead Man. Martina Topley Bird. She does kind of these little haunting female vocals in the background, which are quite nice. She's also on Dirty Drowning Man as well, the Copeland song. So that's kind of a cool dimension to it. And yeah, that wraps up the album. So again, my biggest criticism of it is that it just doesn't sound like Primus. That's my problem with it. But the songs themselves are all quite interesting, and maybe it's one of those cases where if they didn't put the Primus label on it, that it would actually be a much better album, or if they made it known that it was Primus in association with all these people instead of just saying Primus, then I don't know. It is what it is. There's good tracks on it, but it's not the best thing Primus ever did. So stay tuned for the next video, which will be the EP, the short record that is Animals Should Not Try to Act Like People. Which is, actually, well, just before I wrap it up, I'll say the band broke up after this record. They went on hiatus for a few years. And that's what's going to lead us into the next video, which is Animals Should Not Try to Act Like People, released in 2003, blah, 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 blah. Stay tuned for that. Thank you for listening, and you will see me in the future. Take care.